Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast. I'm your host, Erin DeLullo. Please like, share, and review this show. Today's episode is, it was recorded earlier this week. It was a Substack Live I did with Ben Westhoff, author of Fentanyl Inc., and he has his own Substack called Drugs and Hip Hop. We take questions from the audience live, so it's a little different. Please check out our Substack, The Poisoning, and subscribe if you already haven't, and let me know what you think. Enjoy the show. So can we start talking about benzos, please?
Okay, so yeah, benzos, commonly known like Xanax, Valium, yeah.
Lorazepam?
Yes, anything with the Pam in there and Z's. If it's got Z's, it's probably a benzo.
Right, and they've popped up back in our culture. I mean, they're around, 24 million Americans are prescribed them right now, approximately. That's what I've been reading.
Yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah, yeah,
And
people use them to fall asleep or just to relax. It's like I've heard benzos described as like the most perfectly kind of laser focused drug ever invented, at least at the time of its invention. You know, most medicines are kind of like sledgehammers, like I wrote recently. It's like when you're taking chemotherapy, it's going to kill the healthy cells and the cancerous cells equally. But with benzos, it like focuses in right on easing your anxiety, like like pressing a button.
which, you know, do you think 24 million Americans need to be prescribed this?
um, I mean, it's caused a lot of peripheral damage. Certainly, I have a hard time assessing like if it's a net good or a net bad. But benzo prescription is probably like the biggest. Benzo addiction is probably the biggest addiction problem we have in this country that nobody's really talking about.
Right. Um, and what's the real formal name for benzos? I have a hard time pronouncing it.
Oh, benzodiazepines.
Benzodiazepines. Man, I would not do well in pharmacy school. So, the most what are you aware are the most common benzos being taken right now?
I think Xanax by far is most common. Valium is probably second, and then there's all sorts of like I call them like knockoff benzos that are proliferating everywhere. They're made in China, just like fentanyl ingredients usually
Right.
come from China, and they're often twice as strong as Xanax or more. And so those are you can get them on the dark web very easily, and they're super problematic. Benzos don't usually kill you by themselves. People don't usually
Right.
overdose from just a benzo, but it's a depressant. And when it's combined with other depressants, particularly fentanyl or alcohol, then the death rate is very high.
Yes, I met a gentleman who works for the Attorney General of West Virginia, and he had an opioid addiction, overdosed from the opioids, and then later the doctor prescribed him Xanax, overdosed from the combination of Xanax and opioids. Like I was like, what doctor? I mean, maybe he was probably hiding his opioid addiction at the time, but and he was what he told me he was unconscious in the hospital for almost a week. It's pretty powerful
Wow.
stuff. Yeah, and it took several doses of naloxone to bring him back. I think the combo is just really bad. And now
Yeah.
he is working in West Virginia where I live to help with the problems here, the drug problems here. So he's in recovery, but I can't even
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah. I wrote about this fraternity benzo smuggling operation that was in South Carolina, based out of Charleston, and they were moving
Mhm.
like thousands and thousands and thousands of benzos to frat brothers, basically, and they would use it to get over hangovers, a lot of them. So like they'd rage all night on Saturday night, and then they just, they get this really inflated sense of themselves, and they'd be taking, smoking weed and doing all sorts of drugs and have this like very high level of confidence. But then in the morning they'd wake up and they'd just be like, life is bleak. And so
Right.
they would take benzos to basically like get through the day and recover from their hangover, watch football, and try to like get their sense of self-esteem back. So
It, mind-boggling to me. That was not my college experience at all. And
no,
danger. I mean, wouldn't there be some danger to still having alcohol in your system?
I mean, I don't know. I would not recommend it certainly, but
Right.
I don't know if that's a good idea at all. Yeah. What kind of partying did you do when you were in college?
I graduated college in 3 years, so I didn't really party
Okay.
at all.
Okay. Wow.
No,
Just
no.
spend your time in the library, trying to avoid getting into conversations. Like it sounds like.
I went to school in West Virginia at a small college, and it was great because it was back then it was very affordable. State school didn't have the problem that a lot in our society have of a massive debt for an undergrad. And I just never. I also graduated high school early, so I was starting college under 18. Little bit of a type A personality and just had no interest in any of that type of lifestyle. I probably really didn't drink alcohol, even alcohol, until I was close to 30.
Okay,
So very
great.
different, very different. But I don't know, maybe I knew people like me, so not everybody. I just never, I would say that, and I live close to that college town. We moved back to West Virginia during COVID. And the only time I smell pot is in that town. I never said, see it or smell it anywhere else. And
Wow, you should come to St. Louis. Like every other car driving down the road, there's like huge plumes of marijuana that you can smell just driving by. So
which
if
is a
you,
huge
if you,
problem because that means you're impaired and driving a vehicle.
yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't know if it's like people smoking while they're driving or just like the smell lingers. Marijuana smell is just like famously hard to get out of anything, and it's just I think it often lingers. I mean, it's a bad look for a lot of people. Like people applying for jobs and they come into like job interviews with their clothes just reeking of marijuana. And I mean, I think like in states like Missouri is the
Yeah.
furthest southern state that has legalized marijuana. So I've talked to
Mm.
people from like Alabama who drive all the way up here to get weed, and there haven't been a lot of studies done on this kind of thing. And if people are switching from alcohol to cannabis as their like way to get high on the weekends, way to have some fun, then I think that would be a great public health outcome. Marijuana is a lot safer. There's never been an overdose death from just marijuana. But if people are just like getting drunk and they're getting high, now it's just like double the fun. That is going to be a big problem. So it's hard to know how all of this is going to shake out.
Yeah. So people drive, they want it so badly they're driving. How far is that?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds, 600 miles or more. Yeah.
Wow. Wouldn't be the choice I would make. But so Missouri has recreational marijuana then
Yeah.
legalized.
Yeah. Missouri is such a weird state. It's like, it's super Trump. It went for Trump by like 17,
Sure.
18 points. But all these ballot measures are like super liberal that are passing. Like they have all these like union friendly, like the like right to work
Hmm.
message that's like anti union, like was passed by the legislature, but then the voters overthrew it. Abortion rights were like approved by the voters, and recreational marijuana was approved by the voters. So it's kind of a strange sort of dichotomy here.
I have seen that the MAGA movement, I guess that would be what it's referred to or what they call themselves, they have a lot of them have embraced recreational marijuana. Um, so it's just very interesting
Yeah,
bedfellows and politics. And, I do think there's some populism in Missouri. So maybe that's with the union connection. But fascinating stuff. Yeah, I feel like our society, just from what I'm reading, addiction isn't necessarily getting better. We might, and we'll talk about harm reductions and things that are decreasing overdose deaths, but we still have a lot of people addicted to substances. And I even have like colleagues who will say, Erin, my sister, the first thing she does is smoke marijuana when she gets up. She has to do it every morning. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
wow. I don't know. That
yeah.
that
I mean,
seems
I
like
knew.
an addiction to me. That doesn't seem like a a I'm
Yeah,
just
you've
having fun.
definitely. Yeah, like so there's dependence and there's addiction. And like
Hmm.
if you have a physical dependence, you're sort of like if she didn't do it first thing in the morning, she would be like convulsing and have to go to the hospital. And that's not the same as like a sort of mental addiction. And that
Right.
can happen with a lot of things, like coffee. Like if you're most people are addicted to coffee and if they don't have their cup of coffee, at least when I quit coffee, I started getting these horrible headaches,
Sure.
so there was like a physical aspect. But there's also sort of the psychological aspect. And and I'm sure marijuana is a lot like that. People, I used my roommate across the hall or my dorm mate across the hall. She did the same thing. And I know when she said when she didn't do it, she just felt like kind of like not herself. She wasn't as talkative. She didn't sort of have that zest for life. So
To me, my husband and oldest son will attest. Yesterday, I didn't get like my additional cup of coffee before we got out in the car to church. And, was I a little grumpy? Oh, yeah. But I wouldn't say I would say I'm myself. Does that make sense? Like, I don't feel like caffeine changes who I am as a person. But sure, it is a
I feel like it
drug.
changes who I am as a person. It's
Really?
like nowadays it makes me feel like I'm on speed. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like I could, you know, climb up the side of the house or something.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, everyone has a different, I guess, reaction to it. But I do want to talk about benzos more because I find, you write about drugs, but you also write about hip hop, which I know very little about. I'm going to be honest. But I thought it was interesting how you were saying that there were rappers who like one even changed his name to like refer to Xanax or
Oh yeah,
like his
well
rap
he
name.
called himself Little Xan. Yeah, I wrote this piece about. There's a famous rapper called Future. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
have you ever heard of him?
No, but I read the piece.
No.
Sorry, this
Have you
also
heard of
folks.
Kendrick? Have you heard of Kendrick Lamar?
The Daily did a podcast about Kendrick Lamar and
Okay.
Drake. So, and I've heard of them, but then I learned about what their beef was. So, sorry guys, I'm the square
Okay.
one in the relationship or in
So
the interview here.
if a rapper's performed at the Super Bowl, then you've heard of them. Maybe is that a good
Yeah. Yeah.
way to think about it. Well, anyway, this rapper Future super popular. He's collaborated with Kendrick. Kendrick actually remixed this song where Future
Mm.
talks about Percocets, like the kind of the chorus is like Percocets, Molly Percocets. And the song came out in 2017 and it was huge. It has like over a billion, Spotify plays. And my issue is just that Percocets aren't really Percocets anymore when you're buying them on the street. They're almost all fake and they're often cut with fentanyl. The DEA said like 4 out of 10 of these type of street pills had fentanyl. And then later they said it was 6 out of 10. And so, so many kids dying every year from taking these fake pills. And, as I said in the piece, rappers would never glorify taking fentanyl. You just never
Okay.
hear that. And but really, that's what this was. Just by
Yeah.
glorifying Percocet, he was glorifying fentanyl, and I think it was just really really destructive.
Sure, because he's not painting the full picture. I mean, but isn't that so much of our culture, like pop culture? I mean, pop culture is fun, right? I wrote a piece where comparing Hacks, which I love. I love the show Hacks. Currently watching the new season. But they have an episode where her manager just is out clubbing and they're all sharing pills and it's unclear
Uh,
if they're even legit pills, and the only repercussion is like his dog got into his pill and a pill and one of those
hmm.
pills. And
What
I'm like,
happened to the dog?
oh well, he was fine. They got him to the vet on time. They didn't say if they naloxoned him, but yeah,
Yeah,
I don't feel like that. I was like, really, it would be a
I feel like
human
yeah.
would be more realistically hurt than the pet. But then, the show The Pit, I think really, from talking to several emergency room doctors I know, really showed what they were dealing with overdoses and how
Uh,
much they're seeing of it in um, emergency rooms, which just adds to, everybody's healthcare bills.
Yeah, I heard that show is good. I'd like to
Okay.
check that out. But yeah, it seems to me that Hollywood always lags like years behind the drug culture, the real drug culture, you know. And so like I was watching this movie called The Brutalist, which is really amazing,
Oh
by the way. I
yeah.
highly recommend it. But it's like this guy takes heroin and this architect, and it occurs to me that like every single movie you've ever seen about heroin or TV show, it like the character leads to addiction. You know what I mean? It's like as soon as you see that needle coming out, you know this is bad, this is over. You know, but as people have pointed out, like the vast majority of actual heroin users are not problematic users, you know, and so I'm not saying anyone should go and get involved in heroin, but it's just the, you know, the reported out statistics, 80% or something, I think are not, don't have problematic use. But then when it comes to something like pills, like you're talking about, this like party environment that is depicted on in movies and TV shows, you know, or people out like getting crazy, it's like there's almost never any harm depicted from that, like you were saying.
Right. And, then I'm thinking like, I don't let my kids watch things like Hacks. Are they seeing it stuff? Oh, sure. But now, you have to continuously talk to them. Like, this is not realistic because they think they're so young. They think TV is real, what they're seeing on TV. And that's just a
Yeah.
concern, especially with
Oh
all the
man.
devices right now. And so I have a 12 and a 14-year-old, and we are currently off devices. They have one
Wow.
dab watch between the two of them, which is great because no one can contact them through that watch. It has to be set up by me. Um, but they can't see anything that my husband and I don't allow. And it's a good break, it's a good break
It's
for
such
them.
a it's such a battle with screens. I think that the hardest thing as a parent are screens and junk food. You know, those things are just everywhere in our society. It's just impossible. You know, the kids go to school, and like my son is a humble brag alert. My son is in a gifted and talented program, and he goes to that, you know, once a week. And what do? They watch movies and they eat like Twinkies and junk food. You know, I'm like, what is this? What, you know, it's everywhere. You go to the dentist's office, maybe not the dentist, you go to the
Oh.
doctor's office and there's a big jar of candy. You know, it's everywhere.
No, our dentist gives out the slime that's impossible to get out of the carpet or in your car. No, when we talk about cheap things from China, it's like the doctor and the dentist office, they're a big part of that. They're just like buying those trinkets and giving them away to kids. And it's like, we don't need these things. We don't. But that's a whole nother topic I could talk about.
Yeah.
Now, I think we have a special viewer right now, which is sort of exciting. The author of Dreamland, Sam, has joined us.
What's up, Sam? Sam Quinones. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's the
so
man.
How exciting and what an honor. But so let's talk some serious. Do you see Chinese producing more benzos now that, the fentanyl precursors are always being cracked down on?
Well, I think these Chinese companies basically will make whatever's legal, and there's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Chinese chemical companies, and they will literally follow the letter of the law. So in some ways, it's really interesting because most drug producers in most countries don't care about the law, right? But the
Sure.
Chinese chemical companies that were previously making fentanyl, now they're making fentanyl precursors, they really do care about the law. And so, if, when all fentanyl analogs were banned in 2019, they started switching to precursors, they started making more of these benzo analogs in earnest. So a benzo analog is like a type of, it's like Xanax, but
Hmm.
the molecule is just slightly
Okay.
different, for example. And so as long as it's legal, they're going to make them, and they're going to be proliferations, almost like literally infinite amount of possible analogs of these benzos. And, it's the same with xylazine. There's a whole bunch of depressants that may have a medical purpose. They may have like a veterinary purpose, but the chemists are scouring scientific journals, and often they're finding chemicals that were produced for a potential medical product, but they were never brought to market. But there's reason to believe that they still have a psychoactive effect. And
Mm.
so these chemicals are being made in these Chinese labs, and they're often being seized upon by psychonauts, people on the internet who are trying to get high in new and unique ways. And so that's how these things kind of get popularized.
You called them psychonauts?
Knots, yeah, like Psychonauts, not astronauts, but like
Okay.
they're blasting off into the realms of their consciousness.
Wow. And they're just buying these drugs online.
Yeah, a lot of times legally. I mean,
Okay.
if in China anyway. So we are we going for about 20 more minutes?
If that works for you, then I got to move faster. But I do
Okay, and
enjoy the
also
conversation.
I just had a question come in too. So whenever
Yeah,
we're doing any
please.
question,
Well,
oh,
let's
okay, well, go keep going.
no, take a question. Let's do it. Maybe
Oh,
I didn't see it.
this one was for you. This one came into
Oh,
my on my text from Percy Menzies, who I'm
okay.
working with on a documentary about naltrexone.
Oh,
He's going to ask you, since you have so much experience working with Narcan, like, do
yeah.
you see any sort of limitations of Narcan in the sort of the realm of trying to reduce overdose deaths in this country?
So it's very interesting the things I have learned about and Narcan slash naloxone. I had just interviewed a addiction doctor in California, but the audio was terrible, so I couldn't release it last week. It was just not understandable. I don't know what went wrong with the recording, but he is a believer, and he had worked in emergency rooms that you only use less than 4 milligrams of um,
Naloxone.
naloxone, where the standard is 4. And I have, this is a debate within harm reduction, I think, medical circles. But I said to him, I said, so if the layperson has 4 on the street, would you recommend they not give it to someone? He's like, oh, no, no. I'm just trying to bring them out of the overdose as gently as possible. I would then give them MAT, which is, well, it may be like what you are talking about, naloxone, or some type of medically assisted treatment,
Yeah, usually you'd have to go with like a Suboxone to take someone
right.
out. Yeah, for naltrexone, you have to be completely detoxed, which can take a week or more. So,
Um, but then, you know, I've also talked about the shot that's sort of the EpiPen of naloxone that several law enforcement and doctors have used. It's called Zimhigh. It's 5 milligram. It is not over the counter, but when you've tried 3 or 4 of the nasal sprays and it's not working, it's sort of like a last resort, and it's supposedly saved people from the stories we're getting because fentanyl can be very strong and it's, you know, but
Yeah.
hard to come back from. But I don't know everything about the medication you're talking about, but I heard you talk about it because I listened to a lot of your presentations. So I believe in medically assisted treatment. It's still very controversial. In my state, in the legislature, they tried to close some of the clinics down via legislation. They also,
Methadone clinics.
hmm
Oh wow.
yeah, and I'm not saying there's good actors everywhere running clinics, right? You can have a bad apple running that type of clinic. Hey, there was a guy, I think it was in Kentucky, running recovery programs who's just the FBI got him for fraud and all types of problems, or at least that's what he's accused of. I don't know that he's guilty of it. So, I do think that, oh, and to go back, sorry, losing my train of thought. They almost tried to tax naloxone and tax test strips. That was proposed to then create a hotline where people could report drug use. And Dr. I had the head of our West Virginia drug control policy on the podcast, Dr. Stephen Lloyd, where he equated the taxing of those harm reduction measures, which I think have been helpful here in the state. He equated them to taxing, would we be taxing insulin? For those, and then maybe we could report people who are like have
Yeah.
diabetes but are eating their Twinkies or eating their whatever. So I think, and this is one of, I've been reading a lot of your stuff, and we can jump. I guess we're going to run out of time, so we'll jump to this a little bit. And I know you think there may be enough naloxone everywhere, but since
Oh yeah.
I work in public
Yeah.
policy, trying to get it where it needs to be, and people don't know where to get it, Ben. Normal people, that
Yeah.
is. Like if you're a
Well, yeah.
parent
Well,
of a college,
I'm
of a
certainly not.
college student, and you live, I ask people all the time. I mean, I have naloxone out the, wazoo here in my
Yeah.
house. And I hand it out. But people don't know where to go. And like if you wanted to get it in my county in West Virginia, you could go to the next county and go to the
Oh,
county run treatment center. But normal people, or your average people, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said normal. Average people
mm.
don't go to recovery centers. There's still a stigma around that. That's not what they're going to
Yeah. Well,
do.
I certainly wouldn't say that, West Virginia, for example, might be spending too much money on Narcan. I don't know that. But, talking with this guy, Percy Menzies, who runs the recovery center in St. Louis, he's been
Hmm.
approached by different, organizations from the county level, from the city level, and people just don't know how to spend all this money. There's
Right.
tens of billions of dollars coming in, and it seems like the only thing people know to spend money on right now is Narcan. There's this
Oh,
company called Teva that made the fentanyl lollipop, if you remember
yep.
that, and so they had to pay billions in the settlement, the opioid settlement, and so they agreed to contribute something like I ran the math, like almost 50 million doses of naloxone to the cause. And so um, the problem, and obviously Narcan naloxone is like it saves so many millions of lives. It's incredible. It's a miracle drug. But the problem is that it's not preventative. It's just like
Right.
And the analogy that was used was like it's trying to give everyone defibrillators to stop heart disease. You know what I mean? It's we have to like go to the root, and the answer I think is what you were talking about earlier: medication assisted treatment. And the problem is that most addicted users aren't getting medication assisted treatment
Right.
at all. Something like 85% aren't getting it. And there is a lot of money for it already. You know, you can get here in Missouri, you can get on buprenorphine, you can get on naltrexone, the Vivitrol shot, which is a month long shot of naltrexone, basically for free. But a lot of people don't know this. And there's needs to be more outreach, in my opinion.
Okay, so okay, the state is giving that away in Missouri,
Yeah, they're subsidizing it. Yeah.
but do you know where the actual funding is coming from? Is it actually legislated in the budget? Is it by chance a SAMHSA grant? Um,
Ooh, that's a good question.
see,
I think a lot of it is legislated in the budget, but I don't know the fine details.
it will surprise
So,
you how much in especially dealing with opioids is coming from SOAR or SAMHSA that I've been
which is on
researching
the
in the
chopping
same
block, right?
$1 billion potentially and half of the staff cuts. So, you
Yeah.
know,
All right. Well, should we
I
should
try to
we
be positive, but that's something that has popped up. So I feel that you have to address it because we can talk what did you write? Did you say the fentanyl crisis is over?
I wouldn't say it's over, but I think we've hit the peak. Uh,
You've hit yeah, and it's coming down, which is amazing. 27% was reported, I think, last week that the deaths are down, overdose deaths are down 27%. It's about
from
80,000.
all drugs, yeah. And fentanyl deaths are down too, yeah.
So it's good, but it's still high. It's still not like
It's still an
2013.
epidemic. I mean, if you
Yeah,
go back to like the late '70s, early '80s, there were years when like we had 2,000 drug deaths in the whole country per year, and that's when we still thought it was a crisis then, you know. Um,
exactly.
hey, do you want to answer any questions people have? Just, I
Sure.
hate to
I'm
like
not
have promised
seeing.
them.
Do you see the
Oh,
questions? I'm not seeing anything.
oh, you're not. Okay. Well, then I guess we can just keep moving. I thought for some
No.
reason there were.
No, there's somebody Matt wants to know any more books in the works, Ben?
I'm not working on a book right now, but I have a podcast that's coming out late in the fall. It's about a suicide cluster at Truman State University in Missouri. There
Oh,
were um, five people who died. Four of them were suicides. One woman kind of drank herself to death. They were all young people. They all knew this same sort of charismatic figure who's now being sued for in these deaths. And so it's kind of like a true crime podcast, but also trying to answer this question of is this guy guilty of basically talking people into killing themselves or not? So it's going to
that
be
is
called,
fascinating.
yeah, it's going to be called The Peacemaker. Is with iHeart Media, will be out in a few months. So
Congrats on that.
thank you. It's a really grisly story, but I guess they all are. And then my documentary about naltrexone is called Antagonist. It's going to be out sometime this year, later in the year. So.
That's impressive. You've got a lot going on.
Well, what else am I going to do? So, what
Well,
about
yeah.
you? What else are you working on?
Just doing this is a side project away from my day job. So just trying to follow everything that's going on with the opioid settlement dollars and drug policy in general and keeping up with it. I am trying to be hopeful with all these cuts coming out, but it's hard sometimes to be.
Yeah, yeah, understandable. Well, maybe, Trump will backtrack on some of the stuff like he did on the tariffs.
Do you think the tariffs helped with China and fentanyl?
Well, I think when it came to in 2019, when China banned all fentanyl analogs, I think that was directly a result of the kind of trade war that we were calling it then, that Trump initiated. And I think he kind of used the fentanyl as kind of like a carrot and a stick in a way. Like, if you don't stop the fentanyl exports, we're going to have all these tariffs. If you do, then we'll give you some concessions. And then Biden did the same thing. And so, yeah, I think that actually did work. And I think that's why a big part of the reason Trump doubled down in this term. And he's like, this works, and let's do it even more. So I guess the biggest, but first of all, I don't think that China is really driving the problem anymore. The
Okay.
fentanyl precursors are a big problem, but the Mexican cartels are buying them from other places like India now. And so even if China like completely shuts it down, it's still going to be a problem. There's still plenty of other people buying this stuff. Excuse me, selling this stuff. Um, so I think these efforts are kind of misplaced, to be honest. Like, the sort of economic damage that it's going to cause both countries would seem to like dramatically outweigh the any benefits from on the fentanyl side. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, it's definitely a focus on supply side, right? On drugs, but we really need to do focus on recovery, support the demand, helping curb the demand by getting people healthy. And I don't know. I guess the new, what did RFK? It's like Make America Healthy is the new branch of, instead of calling it HHS, that's
Was
what he's
that
proposing.
was that what he was talking about when he was eating at Steak and Shake on Fox News? He's like, "This is how we're getting healthier. We need more of our meals at Steak and Shake."
Yeah, I think he's got to keep certain bases happy.
He seems to think frying things in beef tallow is like the way I feel like a lot of his rhetoric, when I just hear what he's saying without understanding the substance underneath it, I'm like, wow, that sounds great. There are all these corporate interests trying to ruin our
Yeah.
health. But then you get into the nitty gritty of it, and it's like beef tallow. That's your answer.
Yeah, I think there's different ways to be healthy. My grandfather, who just passed at 102 and lived
Uh,
independently until the end. They used to, growing up, take me to McDonald's once a week, but they would eat
that
like
must
a
have been
small.
exciting. That must have been like the most exciting part of your week, I bet.
Right before, and you love this. This was before Wednesday night church, the second church service of the week. So I don't know if all your normal subscribers are used to hearing about church services, but we would go to McDonald's before Wednesday night church, and they would like get a small cheeseburger and a small fry, and I think coffee, which I can't even imagine drinking coffee at 5 in the evening unless I didn't want to sleep that night. But everything they did was in very much moderation, and they were very active. So I think you can, have some things as long as it's balanced and be okay. I mean, my grandmother lived maybe till she was 97. They both lived very long lives. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of talk to a certain, you know, there's a certain base out there right now that just wants to hear about really alternative health fixes. Some of them may
Yeah, and
work.
I think that's cool in some ways. Like, there's no doubt that the mainstream like view of it's called the standard American diet, or
Ugh.
SAD. That's just killing all of us. So I'm glad there's curiosity into moving beyond that. I think the problem is there's so many like just totally fakakta, like the carnivore diet. I mean, I'm a vegan, so that's where I'm coming
Right.
from. And it's like, it's changed our lives. We don't eat, we try not to eat processed foods, oils, things like that. And, we have like no health problems at all. It's amazing. I keep trying to tell people to do this. No one listens to me, not a single person. But this idea that like people honestly believe that like, I see moms pushing strollers, drinking like a bottle of muscle milk.
Yeah.
It's full of like animal protein, dairy, and it's like people think this is how you get healthy. And it's like this emphasis on protein is just absurd when what people need is fiber. Americans
Mm.
need fiber. And there's these crazy diets telling people not to eat beans, and vegetables are overrated. It makes my head explode, but I will stop the rant now.
Is the veganism popular with your Substack audience, or do you not talk about
I doubt it. Yeah,
it?
probably people unsubscribe when they see I'm writing about that.
I'm glad you're realistic. It's good to be realistic. I want to compliment you in one of your pieces on Trump. I loved this line. Politics isn't about being effective. It's about receiving credit or seeming to receive credit for what they're doing,
Yeah,
even if they're not effective. You really hit the
yeah,
head,
that's the
nail right
name
on
of
the
the
head with
game.
that
Yeah.
one.
Whereas my personal philosophy is the opposite. I just like try like if I can sense my readers like feel one way about something, I try to like tell them the opposite
Good.
so they like drinking. I'm always complaining about drinking and how it's the worst thing. Society from a societal perspective, and it's
Oh,
like
sure.
nobody wants to hear that. People just want to be able to enjoy some drinks and like wind down at the end of the day. I know are you a social drinker?
I am. But having started working in this space, I am very, very mindful of it and drink a lot less. And sort of notice, I see the corporatization of it all, right? And I actually see that a lot in the drug space. Um, with legalization of marijuana, there's a lot of money to be made, and I don't know if it's always a good thing, right? So
Yeah,
that's my viewpoint on it. Now we do have a question. Keith, I don't know how to say your last name, Keith, wants
flow
to know if
check. Yeah, great. Keith, hi, nice to talk to you. What's your fastest marathon time? Well, thank you for asking. I just set a new PR at the St. Louis Marathon, 2:53 and about 30 seconds, 2 hours, 53 minutes, about 30 seconds. So Keith and I used to train together, back
Wow.
when I lived in Los Angeles. It's a much nicer place to train than St. Louis. So Keith, please put your PR. Everybody, in fact, put your PRs in the comments. It could be a 5K. It could be just a run around the block. What are some of your PRs, Erin?
I don't track. I do a lot more weights than I necessarily do running. I probably run once or twice a week for a mile or two. I do a lot of steps, do a lot of walking here. It's now that it's nice. The weather's great here right now. But I don't track. Sorry, nothing to compare. But
Oh
I'm all
well, that's
about
all
people
right.
moving. Everybody should be moving, you
I
know?
read I read this book called Born to Walk, and it makes this case that like walking is actually a lot better for you than running, especially the way that like
Hmm.
people get so obsessive about running and they're like beating up their bodies. They're wearing these shoes that are basically like trampolines, and
Yes.
it gets you out of touch with all your joints and so you're probably going to live to be 102 as well.
I hope I have the quality of life my gramps did. It's pretty awesome. But he also had a very clean life. No drinking, no drugs, no smoking, nothing. Never did any of it. So maybe that was a reason too. Okay, we're coming up on our time.
Do you wanna hit one more question and then we'll say goodbye?
If we have another, let's see.
Or I thought you
Oh,
might
what for
have some
me?
more on
Oh,
your list.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the type of education program you think we need for youth. Because
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Do you have more? Were you gonna follow up on that?
no, let's start. Let's start with your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, I always say the two things I think we need to end this epidemic are more access to medication assisted treatment and also better education campaigns. And so the problem now is that a lot of kids still don't know if you take, it's not your parents' like drug landscape, right? So, when you hear about the 60s and the summer of love and even through the 70s, 80s, cocaine, people are doing drugs, they're having a great time, and you might hear about an overdose, but for the most part, people were emerging unscathed largely. Like I said, only 2,000 overdose deaths a year by the early 80s. But nowadays, any pill, any powder can have fentanyl in it. And I don't think most kids know that. And I don't think that I think what we need is a sort of standardized drug education. So there's lots of
Hmm.
different programs out there. Every city, state, county, school district has their own drug education that they've sort of built from scratch often. And I think what we need is sort of like a national program that has standards that the top experts are agreeing on and that is instituted in the same way. I think we need to start really young. I think, even late elementary school is not too early to start with kids. I've got a kid in junior high right now, and there's all
Mhm.
sorts of stuff flying around, vaping, but not just that. So that's, I don't have a lot of on the particulars, but I just think it should be standardized. And I think it should start very young.
Agree with that. 110%. So thank you for coming on today. It was great seeing you, Ben.
Yeah,
And
you too, Erin. This was a lot of fun.
it was. And thanks everybody who joined.